Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 4 minutes after 9 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. I was just looking at a Vietnam veteran standing in the doorway over there, Robin.
Yes.
Joe Martone.
Yes, he is.
Served in Vietnam. I was too young for that. By the time I was of age to be drafted or any of that, the war was over. But I remember sitting in school. I'm sure you went through the same thing, Robin. We're the exact same age, where the announcements for the morning would be naming alumni that had died in the Vietnam War. And it was just one of those every single morning, or maybe not every morning, but I went to a rather big school, and maybe it was every single morning, but this was up in New York. But I remember, hearing those casualties, and fortunately for me, the war was over by the time I became of age to serve. The same wasn't true for Mack W. Payne. He went to school here in Ocala. He graduated from Ocala High School, you said?
Yep.
Ocala High School in 1962?
Yes.
Did I remember right?
Yep.
And he's on the phone right now, and he's written a book about his experience in Vietnam, his time in Vietnam. It's called Vietnam Veteran Memoirs, a Book of Miracles, The Adventures of a Florida Flatlander in Vietnam. Mack W. Payne is on the phone, and he is, in addition to being an author, a highly decorated veteran. He spent 2 years in Vietnam, as I mentioned, raised here in Ocala, and he happens to be a Toastmaster, distinguished Toastmaster.
Yeah.
So let's find out where he is and what he's doing now, and just congratulate him on everything, and of course thank him for his service. Good morning, Mack W. Payne. Good morning, Mack.
Good morning to you, and thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Where are you? Where are you calling from?
Calling from the heartland of Florida, down in Lake Placid.
Oh, okay. So you didn't move too far away, huh?
No, well, a long path led me to Lake Placid. Many stops in between, but I'm living down here now and enjoying it. It's a wonderful place.
You know, and you guys who served in Vietnam came back to a less than congratulatory reception. It was such a horrible mistake we made as Americans. So every time I am able to speak to one of you guys, I want to make sure you know that we appreciate you.
Well, thank you. And one of the main reasons I wanted to be on your show today is to, in addition to talking about the book, I'm going to put in a plug for that Vietnam War generation on the Veterans Day that's coming up. And
yeah.
I believe that Vietnam veterans have just as much to be proud of as the greatest generation from World War II, the Gulf Wars, or whatever. They were a tremendously wonderful group of people.
Yes, sir. I'm sure you stood up to the challenge as much as any soldier in our military ever has. So again, thank you, and thank you for being on there. You know what the book does? The book helps the rest of us understand what you went through.
Yes, the book was very interesting. It was much like an unplanned child. I never had big plans of writing a book. It came about one night. It was very interesting. I'd been in Toastmasters since way back in the mid-'80s, and I worked my way up to the highest level, distinguished Toastmaster, and I joined an advanced Toastmasters club over in Sarasota. And it came time for me to give my first speech, and I wanted to impress them. So for the first time ever, I decided to speak about Vietnam, one of my Vietnam adventures. And it was very well received, and one of the club members was a publisher. And she she recommended that I expand on it and write my memoirs. And you know, when she first said that, I thought, this lady had never spoken to any of my freshman English professors up at the University of Florida. But she said, you have a lot of firsthand knowledge of a very divisive time in the modern history of our country. And I said, no, she's right. So I decided to go into it and write it, and it's been a life-changing thing. And it's done now, and you're looking at the results of it.
Yeah, and what do you mean by life-changing? Was it scary to revisit that part of your life? And because in writing, I mean, you are there again. Not literally, but mentally you're there again.
No, it wasn't scary. Matter of fact, of course, I'm looking at it through a 40-year prism. But, It was when you're young like that, it's more of a lark. There were a few intense times, but it was a big adventure for me. I had the privilege of spent 2 years over there. 1 year was on the ground with the 4th Infantry Division, where I saw it close up. And then the second year, I came back, went to flight school, and went back and flew Cobra gunship with the 101st Airborne Division. And that was the ultimate adventure, shooting rockets. And it wasn't that difficult to recount it. I had to do a considerable amount of research in addition to dredging up memories, but it was a very interesting project.
Have you been back to Vietnam?
No, and I don't have any plans of going back.
Yeah, and the only reason I ask is because we have a veteran show that we do on Thursdays here, and every once in a while there'll be a Vietnam vet who has gone back.
Yeah.
And of course, the country that you guys fought in has been totally changed since the days you fought there, so it's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if it's age or what, but don't care anything about traveling anymore.
Yeah. You were born in Leesburg, right? You were born in Leesburg?
Would have been born in Bushnell, but they didn't have any doctors there at the time, so my mother went over to Leesburg.
and what age did you move to Ocala?
I was not quite a year old, so I grew up in Ocala. Went to school and went up the road to University of Florida in Gainesville.
In Ocala.
So I grew up there.
Refresh my memory. Ocala High School is what became Forest, and now it's Marion Technical, right?
Yeah.
Right. It was the old Ocala High School, and then they changed the name and never quite recovered from it. It's your high school. They like stole my high school.
You know what? That's an interesting thing. Yeah. So were you in high school? Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I went through the ROTC program at the University of Florida. So I started out as a second lieutenant with the 82nd Airborne Division.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Were you able to graduate from college?
Yes. I'd like to say I graduated with honors, but with me it was an honor just to graduate. So, yes, I graduated from the School of Business Administration.
So the speech that you wrote for Toastmasters, was it something you wrote out, or did you just kind of improvise it?
No. Well, good speakers know that it's a lot of work to create a speech, and you definitely write it out and you practice it about 100 times.
Okay.
But I wrote that speech. It's very interesting. In all my years in Toastmasters, I had never spoken about Vietnam because every time I'd bring up the subject, people would act like, oh, it's a little touchy. You better not talk about it. For this group, I just wanted to lay one on them, and it was a little bit whimsical. I talked about a life-changing experience when tracers or bullets were coming through the canopy, and I made kind of light of the situation. But it was a lot of fun.
So is that, once you wrote that out, and then you had the recommendation that you referred to earlier, did that actually become the beginning of the book? Do I actually have in my hands that speech in maybe another form?
No, the speech is not in there, but The Secret of Life is in that book. And I don't want to give the secret out. I want people to buy the book and discover the secret themselves. But I'll guarantee you, if they apply that secret to their lives, it'll be different. Their lives will be better and different.
You have a different opinion about the statement the U.S. lost the war.
Oh, yes. There's many myths about Vietnam, and I highlighted 3 of them. One of them was about they claimed that everybody there was a draftee, and 75% of the people there were volunteers. Another claim was that they were all stupid, illiterate, ignorant people that didn't have any sense. And actually, when I researched it, I discovered that the Army in Vietnam, the Vietnam War, was the most educated army of any time in our history. 80% of everyone there had a high school diploma or higher. But those 2 are 2 that I like to mention. But the biggie that I really, really get on is when I hear someone say that we lost that war, it's totally incorrect, because if you look at it, the war ended in 1973 when they signed the Paris Peace Accord. And everybody went home. In the North, they said, okay, we'll quit. And then 2 years later, after we dropped any support at all for the South Vietnamese government, the North said, hey, let's run on down there and take this country. They're not supporting them, so they just hopped on Highway 1 and drove down to Saigon and said, congratulations, you're now part of North Vietnam. And I always say, how can you say you lose a war if you have a peace treaty, you beat them to a pulp, and they say, okay, we're quitting, let's sign this peace treaty, and they all go home, and then 2 years later, they go in and take over the country, and people can say, we lost. And I'll guarantee you, if the American Army was there in 1975, there wouldn't be any North Vietnamese tanks in Saigon. My contention is we did not lose that war. The only war we lost was the Seminole Indian War down in the Everglades in the 1840s.
Now, why do you say we lost that one?
You mean Seminole?
Yeah.
They just never could beat them. They would go back into the Everglades, and they couldn't find them. Finally, the Army just said, forget it. Just stay in the Everglades, and we'll go back to Fort Myers or wherever.
Yeah, right.
You can, and so they never, that's the only one, I say, we didn't win that war, and we didn't lose it. We just kind of like quit.
Are we hearing a hint of another book in the future? Is that something you're going to write?
There may be one, but this book here is an amazing thing. I love speaking. I overcame the fears of it and everything, and I speak as much as I can. And it's very interesting. If you want to speak to a group, you can go up and say, hey, I'd like to speak to your Rotary or whatever,
right.
Keynotes, and they say, well, we'll think about it. But if you go over there and say, I just wrote this book about Vietnam. It's an expose, and I'd like to talk about it. And they say, well, come on down. And I've been speaking all over the Southeast, from North Carolina to Mississippi and all throughout Florida. So that's been a big thing. I might write another one, but I'm still riding this one right now.
All right, Mack, let me reintroduce you. Mack W. Payne is on the phone. He is in Lake Placid, Florida, but he is from Ocala, graduated from Ocala High School before it was Forest, which was before it was, what is it now?
MTI, Marion Technical Institute.
The book is called Vietnam Veteran Memoirs, A Book of Miracles. Let's talk about that subtitle, A Book of Miracles. What does that mean?
It's very interesting. The book is full of things that happened that could only be described as miraculous and how they turned out. And I'd have to say the biggest one was when I got into flight, my effort to get into flight school. It took me 6 years, and I started when I was a freshman in college. I wanted to become an Army aviator, and so I kept applying, and I'd take the physicals, and my vision was not good enough. In those days, it had to be perfect 20/20. And matter of fact, it got worse as I took it, but I had this strong, overpowering desire that I want to be an Army aviator. I kept trying, and they kept laughing at me when I'd sign up for the physicals, and for some reason, at the end of my first tour in Vietnam, I went over to the hospital in Pleiku, and I was going to take the flight physical one last time, and I was prepared to either bribe the doctor, threaten the doctor, or do whatever it took. I was going to pass that physical, and sat down in front of that big machine where they have all those lenses, and I start reading the lines, and the doctor says, you have perfect vision, don't you? And after I recovered, I quickly said, yes, I do have perfect. Glory, I have perfect vision. And it was 2015, and I talked about it to the doctors about it, and nobody could explain it, why that happened. And I always say that's the biggest one, but there were several others in there. But it's very interesting when you write a book. You get involved in a long, extended writing project, you have a tendency to get your head into it, and you're looking at details, people, places, and things like that. And finally finished it up, got the finished copy back from the editors, and I sat down and read that book from cover to cover for the first time, and it was amazing that even though I had wrote the book, I was surprised at what was in there, and some of these things that I just took as commonplace or since I lived them. When I read about them, I said, gosh, how did that happen? So I had to say,
all right, so
there's a title tag on here.
There are a few examples of that. Where do we start? How about the rhinoceros?
Oh, I just put that one in there. I like to put a little humor in there, and I'll always remember this one incident. On my first tour, I was in the 4th Division at the base camp. The units there would have to send out recon patrols, which were basically you'd walk 10 miles out in the woods, spend 2 or 3 days and like camp out. And on my first patrol, I went over there. All the officers had to go out on an orientation patrol with someone else, and so I was on my first patrol. This other lieutenant was leading it, and he didn't appreciate some of my comments I was making about the way he was conducting the patrol. So he said, "Go to the back and walk with the person carrying the spare radio and keep an eye on him." I was glad to go back there. He wanted to get rid of me, but lo and behold, as soon as I got back there, they ran into something up at the front. Bullets started flying everywhere, and everybody hits the ground. And they were flying through the trees, and the guy carrying the spare radio was a big boy. I mean, he probably played football. And I got down on the ground, and I look up, and I hear this thundering sound, and he decided he was leaving. He wasn't going to hang around for what was happening. And he literally, I got up and said, "Stop, we're going to need that radio." And he crashes into me just like Ray Lewis, the linebacker, crashes into the quarterback. No. Knocks me down. I probably flew through the air. He hit me so hard, and I'm laying on my back, and he runs on top of me, and I grab his legs, and he falls forward. And I said, "Just lay there. We might need that radio." But that led to an even humorous incident. I went up, I was waiting for him to do something, so I go up to the front, and I said, "These people, they might need some assistance up there." So I go up there, and the lieutenant and the sergeant, they're looking up in the trees. And I said, why are you looking up in the trees? The people shooting at us are over there. And he says, "The people back at the base camp at the Tox told us to check the trees." And I said, "You mean, shouldn't you be looking at the people over there who are shooting at us rather than talking to somebody back in a bunker, back in the base camp and looking at the..." Anyway, it led to some humorous incident.
Oh, wow.
It all started. The guy looked just like a raging rhino, and he crashes into me.
Got it. Okay, now I understand.
Have you been in touch with people that you served with, and have you shared the book with them?
I talked to a few of the guys. I was amazed. I ran into some of them, and they're doing fine. And I talked to a few of them. One of them was one person who, you ever heard of these people that can bowl overhanded?
Oh,
no.
No. These outstanding people. I went to college with a guy by the name of Jim Fadden up at Gainesville, and lo and behold, we ended up in the same unit over in Vietnam, and he was one of these larger-than-life characters. I even devoted a chapter about Big Jim Fadden in the book, but I contacted a few, but not much. I never have gone to these reunions and everything. I'm like in the, we got to look at what's happening today and what's happening tomorrow, and don't live in the past.
Well, how do you think that helps the people that still have the post-traumatic stress syndrome from Vietnam, even though it wasn't called that back then? Do you think your book could be therapeutic for them?
Yeah, it could be. And, for those people who have those problems, I give all my sympathy goes to them, but I believe that the vast majority of the people that were over there in Vietnam did well. They're normal people and are leading normal lives. And for those that did have problems, I'm sorry, and I hope that they get over it. And I would love for them to read the book. I don't know if it would help them or not.
And I'm guessing it sounds like when you mentioned the 40-year prison between the time that this takes place and the time you're writing about it has maybe tempered, I guess is a good word, your memories about it. So it wasn't therapeutic, or it wasn't that you didn't have any emotional reaction reliving these things, huh?
Yeah, no, I didn't have any problems. People talk about nightmares, and I don't know why, but I never had any of those problems. And luckily, when I came back, both times, I never encountered any long-haired spitters. Nobody spit on me.
Well, that's good. Yeah. What about Walter Cronkite? You're not so kind to Walter Cronkite, according to my notes. How come?
Well, good old Walter, I cited him. He's sort of a representative of a mindset that was going on, and I put him in there because it was like what the news media was doing at the time. I took the example of the Tet Offensive of 1968. It was a real big offensive, and they were trying to win the war. The North was trying to win the war once and for all, but it turned out to be a colossal and total defeat for the North Vietnamese. In 2 days, they lost over 50,000 troops. And I was right there in the middle of it. I saw it, experienced it, and saw the aftermath of it. And I heard Walter Cronkite on the CBS Evening News reporting on the Tet Offensive, and he looks out at the American people and says, "We have lost the war." And when I heard that, I was baffled. I said, how in the world could Cronkite conclude that we lost the war? And I was thinking, if we lost the war as a result of the Tet Offensive, we should have lost it every day, and in about 5 days, there wouldn't be any of them left.
Yeah,
They'd all be dead. And I said, how could he? And the problem is, not only did I hear that, but General Gap, the commanding general of the North Vietnamese army, heard it and confirmed his suspicion that he was fighting an enemy with a weak national will. So he was actually going to pull out of the war because of their defeat, because they were just slaughtered. And he said, wait a minute, we didn't lose this thing. Listen to what this guy said. So they continued fighting, and the fighting continued until 1973 when they signed that Paris Peace Accord. So I like Walter Cronkite, watched him for many years, but I am persuaded to believe from what I saw and experienced and studied that all those Americans that died in that war from 68 to 73, the blood of those young people is on the hands of Cronkite and all the rest of them in the media. And sad to say, I believe there are still people today in the media and our government who are just as defeatist toward the American Constitution and the American way.
Thank you. Yes, I think you're right. I think you're saying a mouthful right there. Again, the book is called Vietnam Veteran Memoirs. It's a book of miracles, the adventures of a Florida flatlander in Vietnam. He's not just a Floridian, he's an Occalan. Mack W. Payne, he's not in Ocala now. He does not live here anymore, down in Lake Placid, but graduated high school here in Ocala. Can you connect the dots? Is there anything about you now that is a direct result of your service in Vietnam?
Yes, I would say, well, you're a much better person because you have these experiences. But one tangible way I can say I'm a better person was when I decided to get out of the Army and pursue my dream of entrepreneurship. I started a little cultured marble business down in Naples, and using some of the lessons learned in Vietnam about how to overcome obstacles, that little business that started in a storage unit within 4 years became the largest cultured marble manufacturer in the state of Florida, and I owe a lot of that to the things I learned in Vietnam, how to overcome things, because when you start a business, you've got challenges every day that drive you crazy, and you could easily just give up and say it's too difficult. I'm not going to put up with this anymore. But we hung in there, and with the able help from my brother down there in Naples, we built that business up to the biggest in the state. And we had some tough competition in Miami and Tampa and Orlando, but we were numero uno, and I attribute it to the hard-nosed lessons I learned over there in Vietnam.
Morale is extremely important. How did your family over here keep up their morale while you were over there?
I have no idea, but I owe my poor departed mother an apology because it's a strange thing. I went over there twice, and all I thought about was what I was going to be doing and what I was going to be facing. I never hardly even thought about my poor mother, who was a widow at the time, about how difficult it was, and it hit me like a ton of bricks when my son went over to Iraq, and Afghanistan 3 times. It was like, it was just a tremendous burden to bear, and I'm thinking my poor mother, I never even hardly thought about it.
That's interesting,
but it was rough on the people back home.
Wow, and that is really amazing that your son wanted to enlist and be in the service to serve his country. You must be an ultimately great role model for your family.
Well, it must be. I never talked about the Army too much, but my son followed in all four of my children followed in my footsteps to the University of Florida, and my son joined the Army, and a big deal about it was he went to jump school, and I never thought a thing about it, but I decided to go to his graduation up in Fort Benning, and as I was driving up there, I said, hey, I have my old set of jump wings. I'll take them up there, and he won't have to buy a set. I'll just give him those. And I did not realize until I got up there, I was pinning those same jump wings on my son that were pinned on me 40 years before, and he was going to wear those wings in the combat the way I did. And that's another ton of bricks that hit me.
Wow. Mack, we have a listener calling in, and then we'll get the information so we can tell people how to get the book. Good morning. You're on the air with Mack W. Payne. Thank you for being patient with me.
Hey, Mack, just want to say welcome home and welcome back to the United States, and thank you for your service. I'm the son of the United States Korea infantryman, and when he came home, he joined the Union, and I'm an 11-year veteran of the Marine Corps and came home and joined the Union. And politically, we may disagree, Mack, but I want you to know that I do respect you. I was also given a chance to fly helicopters in the U.S. Army, and I have perfect eyesight, and I just turned it down because I like working with people more than being a pilot, which I end up doing. But I wanted you to know that my fellow Marine James Webb authored the current modern GI Bill, of which your son will be eligible for, and John McCain voted against it. And one thing I say to Vietnam veterans, you know what Vietnam and Iraq have in common? And Mack, the question would be yours now. What would you say?
All right.
What do they have in? Well, thank you. You're very welcome, and I also thank you for your service too, and I appreciate it. But I'm sorry, what was the question?
I think you wanted to have your opinion, what you think Iraq and Vietnam have in common.
One thing that's totally different is the way they're treating the people who come home from it. My son was telling me if he could do no wrong, and apparently they were spitting on Vietnam veterans. But let's see, you've got the military. There's lots of differences. The terrain was different, but the same thing whenever you're fighting an enemy, regardless of where it is. That's the main thing that makes it the same. Mm-hmm. When he's trying to, you got to kill them before they kill you.
Right. Mack, thank you for being on the air with us, and again, thank you for your service. I have the book. I have a copy of the book, and in fact, Mack has signed it. So I'd like to give it away, and the rest of us will have to go buy it. If you want the copy I have, call me right now, and I'll leave it for you here at the station. Mack, do you have a website for the book?
You bet I do. I built it myself. It's called VietnamCopy.com. That's a URL you can remember if you're flying up I-75. It's VietnamCopy.com. There's several ways you can buy it there, but you can also get it at Amazon.com, both in the electronic and the paperback version.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
So go buy a book and help support an old veteran make his light bill.
Let me give away this one. Good morning. You've got the book. Who's this?
This is Alan.
Who is it?
Alan?
Alan? Okay, you've got the book, Alan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It'll be waiting. You know we were at the mall now, right?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. All right. It'll be waiting for you.
Okay. Thank you for your service, sir.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, there you go. And yes, thank you for your service, and thank you for being on the air, and thank you for giving us a great interview, Mack.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I enjoyed it, being back in old Ocala.
Yeah, man. Mack W. Payne, thank you. We'll take a little break, and we'll be right back.
Hi, this is Joe, and I'm your host for the new show, Damage Control, every Tuesday morning at 10:30 a.m., brought to you by Damage Control Services. We're going to be discussing floods, fires, storm and tree damage, sinkholes, mold, and many other disasters that you need to know about, how to prevent and prepare for them,